Mafia. They imagined dark alleys, Tommy guns, backroom meetings. But by the late 20th century, organized crime understood something most people didn't. The real battlefield wasn't the street. It was finance. Wall Street, the heart of American capitalism. Every single day, billions of dollars move through stock exchanges, brokerage firms, and investment houses. It is a world built on trust, and trust can be manipulated. By the 1970s and 1980s, traditional rackets were becoming riskier. Law enforcement had new tools. The RICO Act made it easier to prosecute entire crime families. Wiretaps were stronger. Public violence brought unwanted media attention, so the Mafia adapted. Families like the Genovese crime family and the Gambino crime family began shifting toward white-collar crime, because white-collar crime had two advantages. It paid more, and it looked legal. The entry point was small brokerage firms. Not the giant investment banks you see in movies, but struggling penny stock operations, desperate for capital. Mob associates would quietly invest. Sometimes they would intimidate owners. Sometimes they would partner with corrupt Step by step, control shifted. Once control was secured, the real operation began. The pump and dump scheme. Here's how it worked. A worthless company would issue cheap shares. Mob-connected brokers would aggressively push those stocks to clients. Cold calls flooded households across America. Salesmen used pressure tactics. They promised explosive growth. Insider information guaranteed returns. At the same time, rumors were spread to artificially inflate excitement. The stock price rose rapidly. Investors rushed in, afraid of missing out. And once the price peaked, the insiders sold everything. The stock crashed. Retirement savings vanished. Ordinary Americans lost millions. The Mafia walked away rich, but stock fraud was only part of the infiltration. Organized crime also used Wall Street for money laundering. Illegal profits from gambling, loan sharking, and extortion were cleaned through complex financial transactions. Shell companies were created. Fake consulting fees were issued. Offshore accounts were opened. Dirty money became clean on paper. Investigations in the 1990s revealed that certain brokerage houses were almost entirely controlled by mob influence. Employees who refused to cooperate were threatened. Some were beaten. Others were simply forced out. The atmosphere was one of silent fear. Wall Street, a symbol of American ambition, had become a playground for organized crime. Eventually, federal investigators began connecting the dots. Undercover agents posed as brokers. Wiretaps captured conversations discussing stock manipulation. Financial records revealed hidden ownership structures. Major indictments followed. Dozens were arrested. Millions of dollars were seized. The cases exposed how deeply organized crime had infiltrated America's financial system. But the lesson was bigger than arrests. It showed how adaptable the Mafia truly was. When Prohibition ended, they moved into gambling. When gambling became regulated, they moved into construction. When construction became monitored, they moved into finance. Violence was no longer the primary weapon. Information was. Control of capital was. And the most dangerous criminals were no longer carrying guns. They were carrying briefcases. Wall Street survived. Regulations tightened. Oversight increased. But the episode proved something chilling. Organized crime does not need dark alleys to survive. It thrives wherever greed meets opportunity. And for a time, the Mafia didn't just rule the streets. They manipulated the market. The dark truth about the Genovese crime family **. Extended cinematic documentary, voiceover script, * among New York, S5 families. One developed a reputation unlike the others. Not flashy, not reckless, not loud. The Genovese crime family, often described by investigators as the most disciplined mafia organization in America. Its roots trace back to early 20th century New York's Italian underworld. Power struggles between crime bosses shaped its foundation. Eventually, leadership passed to Vito Genovese. Genovese was patient, strategic, ruthless when necessary. Unlike flamboyant bosses who enjoyed publicity, Genovese preferred silence. he understood something critical. Attention invites investigation. Silence builds longevity. The family built influence quietly across labor unions, construction projects, and waterfront operations. Control the docks, and you control imports. Control unions, and you control contracts. The structure was hierarchical and disciplined: boss, underboss, consigliere, caporegams, soldiers. Every level had defined responsibilities. Information was compartmentalized. No single member knew everything. This made infiltration extremely difficult. When federal crackdowns hit organized crime in the 1980s and 1990s, many families suffered devastating losses. High-profile leaders were arrested. Internal betrayals shattered trust, but the Genovese family endured. Acting bosses took over when leaders were imprisoned. Street captains maintained operations. Orders were passed discreetly. No flashy interviews. No public displays of wealth. This approach protected them. Even when powerful figures were convicted under RICO laws, the organizational framework survived. Law enforcement officials have often described the Genovese family as the Ivy League of the Mafia. Calculated, methodical, professionally and criminal enterprise. They diversified revenue streams, illegal gambling networks, loan sharking, union corruption, construction, bid, manipulation, and yes, even infiltration into financial systems. While media-focused bosses like John Gotti captured headlines, Genovese leadership stayed in the shadows, and shadows are harder to prosecute. The dark truth about the Genovese crime family isn't just about violence, it's about structure. It's about patience. It's about understanding that survival matters more than ego. Even today, federal investigations occasionally result in arrests tied to Genovese members. But the organization, though weakened from its peak, remains resilient. It adapted to modern surveillance, reduced overt violence, focused on profitable, low-visibility operations. The family learned from history, from the fall of other bosses, from public trials, from betrayal, and it adjusted. That is the real secret of its endurance. Not fear alone, but discipline. In the world of organized crime, loud empires burn bright and fall fast. Quiet empires last longer, and for decades, the Genovese crime family proved that. In the underworld, silence is strategy. New York City, 1985. The streets were loud, the money was flowing, and the mafia still ruled from the shadows. But one cold December night, everything changed. For decades, New York had been controlled by the five families: the Gambino, the Genovese, the Lucchese, the Colombo, the Bonanno. They didn't just control neighborhoods, they controlled construction, garbage hauling, labor unions, ports, nightclubs, even parts of Wall Street. At the top of this underworld empire stood one man, a quiet, calculating boss named Paul Castellano. Wasn't he flashy? He wasn't loud. He preferred business suits over street fights. He believed in white-collar crime, stock, fraud, construction, rackets, corporate infiltration. To him, the mafia was evolving. It wasn't about bullets anymore, it was about billions. But not everyone agreed. In Brooklyn, another man was rising. A man who loved attention, expensive suits, silk ties, camera flashes. His name was John Gotti. Gotti was a capo in the Gambino family. Ambitious, charismatic, dangerous. And he believed Paul Castellano was weak. Tensions had been building for years. Castellano rarely met with street captains. He focused on high-level rackets and distanced himself from traditional soldiers. He even skipped the funeral of a respected owner. Too many in the family, it felt like betrayal. But the final spark came in 1985. Federal agents had bugged a house belonging to Castellano's crew. On tape, they caught conversations involving Gotti and others, discussing drug dealing. Drugs were forbidden, at least officially. Castellano was furious. and whispers spread that Gotti was about to be killed for breaking the rules. In the Mafia, rumors like that are death sentences. Gotti knew the clock was ticking, and he made a decision. If he waited, he'd die, so he would strike first. December 16th, 1985. Outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan. Paul Castellano arrived for dinner. He stepped out of his car in a long overcoat. Snow dusted the sidewalks. Christmas lights glowed in the distance. Across the street, men waited. They wore trench coats and Russian-style fur hats. They looked like ordinary pedestrians in winter. They were not ordinary. As Castellano walked toward the entrance, gunmen rushed forward. Shots exploded in the cold air. Paul Castellano collapsed onto the sidewalk. His driver, Thomas Bellotti, was shot multiple times. In seconds, it was over. New York had just witnessed one of the boldest mafia assassinations in history, and across the street, standing calmly, watching it happen, was John Gotti. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He watched his future being secured. By the next day, everyone knew this was a coup. Gotti had broken one of the most sacred mafia rules. You do not kill a boss without approval from the commission. The commission was the governing body of the 5 families. It maintained order, prevented wars, approved major decisions. Gotti had asked no one. He had acted alone, and that act changed New York forever. Because now, the mafia wasn't just a secret society, it was headline news. The newspapers exploded with coverage. The photos of Castellano's body on the sidewalk shocked the public. Television anchors spoke his name daily. And suddenly, John Gotti became famous. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He embraced the spotlight. The press gave him a nickname, the Dapper Don. He wore $2,000 suits, silk ties, perfectly styled hair. He smiled outside courtrooms. He waved at cameras. It was something new. Previous bosses valued silence, invisibility omerta. Gotti wanted celebrity, and that shift drew enormous attention from law enforcement. The FBI was already building cases against the mafia. But now, they had a public enemy. Agents began focusing heavily on Gotti. Wiretaps increased. Surveillance intensified. They followed him everywhere. Yet somehow, trial after trial ended in acquittal. Witnesses disappeared. Jurors were compromised. Evidence weakened. Gotti earned a second nickname, the Teflon Don, because nothing stuck. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. The other families were furious. The Genovese family, known for their quiet intelligence, saw Gotti as reckless. The Lucchese family worried about the heat he was bringing. The Colombo family feared internal war. Gotti's flashy lifestyle violated decades of mafia tradition. He attended social clubs openly. He held court outside the Ravenite Social Club in Little Italy. Crowds gathered just to see him. The FBI loved it, because fame makes surveillance easier. And slowly, methodically, they built a case. In 1988, Gotti was arrested again. But once more, he beat the charges. However, one man was growing tired. Sami Tabol, Gravano. Gravano was Gotti's underboss, a feared killer, loyal for years. But as pressure mounted, Gravano noticed something disturbing. Gotti was talking too much. On secret FBI recordings, Gotti criticized his own crew. He blamed Gravano for murders. He complained about loyalty. And the tapes were clear. This time, the evidence was overwhelming. In 1990, Gotti was arrested again. This time, the government used the RICO Act. Racketeering, murder, conspiracy. And the biggest shock came next. Sammy Gravano flipped. He became a government witness, the highest-ranking mafia member in history to cooperate at that time. In court, Gravano described murders in chilling detail. He confirmed Gotti's role in the Castellano hit. He outlined the inner workings of the Gambino family. The code of silence was shattered. In 1992, John Gotti was convicted. Life in prison without parole. The Dapper Don fell, and with him, the old Mafia era began to collapse. Because this hit, this single act outside Spar's steakhouse, triggered something bigger. The government realized public trials could dismantle entire crime families. The RICO Act became a weapon. More informants stepped forward. Fear shifted. For decades, Mafia members feared their bosses. Now they feared prison more. And when fear changes direction, power changes hands. By the late 1990s, the five families were weaker, still active, but diminished. More cautious, less violent. The golden age of public mafia dominance was over. New York itself was changing too. Crime rates dropped. Mayoral policies became stricter. Organized crime lost control over construction and unions. Wall Street modernized. Corporate oversight increased. The streets where bodies once fell became tourist attractions. But that December night remains a turning point, because the assassination of Paul Castellano did more than replace a boss. It exposed the mafia. It transformed a secret criminal empire into a media spectacle. It provoked federal fury, and it accelerated the fall of organized crime in America's largest city. Some say Gotti's ambition destroyed the very system he wanted to control. If he had stayed quiet, if he had followed tradition, maybe the Gambino family would have remained powerful longer. But ego is dangerous, and in the mafia, ego can be fatal. Today, Sparks Steakhouse still stands in Manhattan. Most people walk past it without knowing what happened there. But for those who understand history, that sidewalk marks the moment the old mafia died. The mob hit that changed New York forever. It wasn't just about bullets. It was about pride, power, publicity, and the beginning of the end. Because once the underworld stepped into the spotlight, there was no going back.